everybody, it's Emily at Arg Schooling, and today I thought it'd be fun to talk about historical fiction for every reader. Now, I feel like historical fiction is one of those genres that can encompass so many different things that there's something for every reader. So I thought today I'd play with that idea and give you guys some recommendations based on genres that I think people typically gravitate toward. And we're going to start with mysteries and thrillers. I feel like this is a genre that is popular on BookTube. I feel like a lot of people like mysteries and thrillers, and so I think if that's your thing, these historical fiction recommendations are books that you might want to check out. I'm going to start with my favorite, which is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. I talk about this book a lot. It's fantastic. This is a historical fiction mystery that is so plot twisty that I don't know that I can really give you enough of a synopsis because I don't want to spoil anything. So all you really need to know is this is very Oliver Twist-ish. There's an orphan. She's asked to con this woman out of her fortune, and things happen. So it's Victorian London. It's very, like I said, very Dickensian. Like it's really fun to read. This would also qualify as like literary fiction, I think. If literary fiction is a thing you like, if you like mysteries and thrillers, why don't you try some Sarah Waters? Because her books are all very much literary, but also full of weird plot twists and things you didn't see coming. And they're also all queer. Then I want to recommend The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Now, I'm a little rusty on this one because it's been about 10 years since I read it, but I absolutely loved this when I did. This is a story that is very much about books and reading and a love of books and book collecting, and there's an author that people want to know more about. She's giving her life story to this journalist, and there are mysteries to uncover. It's a beautiful story. It's beautifully written. I kind of want to reread it again sometime soon because it's been a long time. Then my last mystery thriller recommendation is The Gods of Gotham by Lindsay Faye. This is New York City in the 1850s, I believe. This is the very beginnings of the police force, hence Gods of Gotham. This is a story about like the formation of the police force, but there's also a murder mystery going on. And it's just really interesting to read about. There's a lot in here about Irish immigrants and the way immigrants in general were treated as they were coming into New York City in this time period. It's really great literature, I think. Next, I want to talk about another genre that I feel is very popular, which is fantasy. Now, these books are going to be quite the range, but they're all historical fantasy selections. Let's start with, again, one of my favorites, The Golem and the Ginny by Helen Wecker. This is a story set in New York City around the turn of the century. We're following two characters. One is a golem and one is a Ginny. And you get to see the cultures that these creatures come from and how they came to New York City and why they are there. And there's this intricate storyline happening that I just like, when I finished this book, I had to sit and stare into the middle distance for a minute because I was just like, wow, that was something. I just think it's really well done. I love the diversity of it. I love getting to see how these characters interact. And I love the setting of Gilded Age New York City. The next is one I've talked about so much on my channel, and that's Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is a story about World War I, and it's narrated by the Greek pantheon, which is what makes it fantasy. Because while the people in the story are just average, regular people, the people telling the story are the Greek gods. And you get to see, like, how the gods took part in the different aspects of the war, and you get to see like how they made things happen in these characters' lives. It's beautiful. This is a beautiful book, and if you like fantasy but like light fantasy, this is perfect for you. Now, if you like silly books, then I would recommend checking out the Lady Janey series. And this is My Lady Jane by several authors. We got Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This is a story about a character I love historically, which is Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen. This is a fantasy because everything that happens in this story is nonsense. It's so silly and so much fun. We got shapeshifters. We've got a happy ending for a character who honestly deserved one. And it's just, it's Tudor England, but fun. Now I want to talk about contemporary. If you tend to read a lot of contemporary, these are books that I think would work for you, but are still historical. The first one is A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahira Mafi. This is set in the days following 9/11, and so even though it's modern day, it is technically historical fiction. What is that even? I don't know. There are books that are set in the 80s and 90s that are considered historical fiction now, so there you go. So this is about a girl who is Muslim, and she's grappling with the racism she's experiencing in the days after 9/11 and how it's affecting her life, and there's some romance in here. So I think this is great if you tend to like contemporary type stories with a little romance. This is YA, so I think this could work for you if you want to try some historical fiction. Then I want to recommend The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I feel like this is super popular, so I probably don't even really need to mention it, but I'm gonna, because I feel like if you are new to historical fiction, if you tend to read contemporary type stories, this is right up your alley. This is a famous movie star, a fake famous movie star. She's not real. And she's telling her life story to this journalist, and it's just so fun to read. It feels very real. Like you feel like this is a real actress, that you could go and like look up her movies and watch them. Like it feels like it could have really happened. So I think this is a great option if you want to test the waters and get into historical fiction. This one is not so contemporary, but it's about real people, so I'm going to throw it in here. And that's The Last Days of Night by Graham Moore. This is a book about the battle over electricity. So we've got Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla, and how these people are interacting. And so it's about a lawyer who is working for George Westinghouse and trying to defeat Edison, and like Thomas Edison has like a lock on electricity, and no one else can like make any money in this area because of how he set up his business. And so these are all real people. This is all like things that really happened. And so it's really interesting to read a historical fiction that's about real people, events that really happened. Like there's a lot of like, you could look up pictures of each person and see what they looked like. I don't know. I just found that very entertaining while I was reading. If you tend to enjoy reading graphic novels, I have some recommendations for you. First up, I have Displacement. This is by Kiku Hughes. This is a graphic novel about a girl who is Japanese American, and she lives in modern day. And every now and then she just like spontaneously will time travel. And sometimes it's for moments, sometimes it's for months, and she's going back in time to Japanese internment and experiencing that because her grandmother lived through the Japanese internment camps. And so she's going back to this time. She isn't her grandmother, she's like just herself, but she happens to be in the same camp as her grandmother, and she's sort of following her. And so this is a story about generational trauma and how the experience of the Japanese internment camps had affected not just those who were there, but their children and grandchildren. And so this is just beautifully done. Like the art in this is just gorgeous. I loved it. And the story is fantastic. Then of course, this is always popular, The Complete Personalist. This is by Marjane Satrapi. This is her memoir about her experiences in Iran during the Iranian Revolution and being a girl in that time and what that was like. It's black and white illustrations. It's very easy to read. Very fascinating. I love stuff like this. I love reading memoirs, and so again, if you like nonfiction too, this is a great option. Then I want to recommend another memoir. This one is The Best We Could Do by T. Boy, and this is her memoir about her parents and how they came to immigrate to America in the midst of Vietnam War. So you're getting a lot of stuff about the Vietnam War and life in Vietnam in that time, and like right before the war starts and during the war, and what it was like to be immigrants in America in like the 1970s and 80s. And so it's really, really great reading, but it's historical. It's not fiction because it's a memoir. So both of these don't quite count as historical fiction, but they are historical, so I think it counts. And then really quick, before I wrap this up, I want to talk about two books that are poetry and verse. So if you enjoy poetry and books in verse, I'm going to recommend you check out And We Rise by Erica Martin. This is a book of poetry about the civil rights movement, and it is so good. This is like very powerful, beautifully written. Like, I just think this book is fantastic. It reads very fast because it's poetry, and a lot of it is like the same words on a page, and there's like a lot of really cool stuff happening with the text, but it's so good. Like, very powerful, very moving. Yeah, I just think this is a great book of poetry. And then I want to talk about Audacity. This is by Melody Crowder. This is about Clara Lemlich, who was a Jewish immigrant in America at the turn of the century. Her family came from Russia. During the pogroms, they escaped to America. And this is a story about her, like, as an immigrant, as a girl, working in the garment industry and fighting for workers' rights. And she's a real person, but this is historical fiction about her. But the author consulted her family to make sure she gave an accurate representation of Clara, and it's so good. I loved this. I think this is a great story to read. It reads really quickly because it's in verse, so it's like a very fast read, but it's so well written, so really interesting. Made her really come to life for me. I'd read about Clara before, but this was the first time like she felt like a real person to me. So those are going to be my recommendations for you today. I hope I mentioned a book that you're excited to try out. If you've never read historical fiction before and you really want to try something, I hope you pick one of these books to read. So just to keep this going, if you want to leave a recommendation down below in the comments for one of the genres that I mentioned today, that would be amazing. And then we can get like more recommendations and more books for people to check out. So yeah, leave your recommendations down below for any books that are historical fiction that fit in the genres I mentioned today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Happy reading. Bye.